They were never gods. They only ensured you believed they were. Ages before the tales of Genesis were whispered around desert campfires, before the pyramids clawed at the heavens, and before priest-kings charted the celestial dance, they arrived beings from beyond the known cosmos. The Sumerians, those ancient scribes of the cradle of civilization, named them the Anunnaki, those who came from the heavens to earth. Whether you envision them as ancient astronauts seeding our world, fallen angels tempting humanity with forbidden knowledge, or something far stranger and more profound, one truth resonates across millennia. Their presence irrevocably shaped the genesis of human civilization, and their enigmatic legacy persists, woven into the very fabric of our existence. Everything you've been taught about human origins, about the nature of divinity, about the sanctity of myth, was painstakingly crafted. A narrative carefully curated to conceal a single, earth-shattering secret. These entities were not gods deserving of blind worship, but beings possessed of advanced technologies, intricate agendas, and powers that continue to elude our comprehension. The true stories were suppressed, the sacred symbols deliberately misinterpreted, and only fragments of a manufactured reality were permitted to surface a world meticulously designed to ensure you forgot your true origins and the true nature of those who walked among us. Dare to question the foundations of your reality. What if every belief about our origins, meticulously perpetuated by scientists and theologians alike, is a masterful illusion? What if the very genesis of humanity, as presented in textbooks and sacred texts, is intentionally missing the keystone, not through oversight, but through deliberate design? The Sumerians, the architects of the written word and the progenitors of civilization, did not speak of evolution or divine creation in the simplistic terms we've come to accept. They chronicled the arrival of sky beings, the Anunnaki, not as ethereal metaphors or distant deities dwelling in the clouds, but as flesh and blood entities who descended to earth with a purpose, a mission. According to these clay tablets, etched into existence thousands of years before the Bible was conceived, the Anunnaki didn't merely influence humanity. They deliberately engineered us. We are told that we arose from primitive apes through the laborious, often chaotic processes of evolution, shaped by random mutations, natural selection, and the relentless drive for survival. Yet in the blink of an eye on the cosmic timescale, approximately 200,000 years ago, modern Homo sapiens emerged, fully formed, endowed with the capacity for complex language, inherent spiritual instincts, and the unparalleled ability to construct, cultivate, organize societies, and engage in worship. Such a monumental leap in development defies all natural explanation. No other species on Earth has ever undergone such a rapid and transformative evolution. The vast gulf that separates our primitive ancestors from the modern human is a chasm that science struggles to bridge. But the Sumerians offered an answer, a compelling explanation etched in stone. Their ancient records reveal that the Anunnaki journeyed to Earth driven by a desperate need for gold, a vital element not merely for wealth and ornamentation, but essential for sustaining their planet's fragile atmosphere and advanced energy systems. Discovering early hominids inhabiting this world, they recognized their potential, but not their immediate usefulness. Driven by necessity, they intervened. They did not simply enslave us, they embarked on a daring act of genetic re-engineering. Enki and Ninursag, two prominent figures within the Anunnaki hierarchy, are credited with combining their own genetic essence with that of the primitive human species, birthing a genetically altered human capable of advanced thought, complex language, unwavering obedience, and tireless labor. This narrative is conspicuously absent from classrooms and Sunday sermons because this version of our past dismantles the comforting illusion that we are miraculous, divinely chosen beings or noble survivors of a blind and uncaring nature. Instead, it exposes us as a created species, deliberately modified by extraterrestrial interlopers, and perhaps even to this day, carefully watched. This is the question they desperately hope you never ask. It dismantles the illusion that our governments, religions, and institutions possess all the answers. For the moment you dare to question the accepted narrative of our origins, you are compelled to reevaluate everything that followed. Who truly wrote our history? Who benefits from perpetuating the dominant paradigm? The Sumerians were not alone in these revelations. Similar creation stories echoing tales of gods descending from the stars, mingling their divine seed with humans, and bestowing upon us the arts of civilization resonate throughout other ancient cultures. In the book of Genesis, the sons of God took wives from the daughters of men. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs claimed direct descent from divine bloodlines, ruling for generations as living gods. In the Mahabharata and other Vedic texts, beings descended in flying crafts known as Vimanas and actively intervened in human affairs. Different names, different landscapes, but the same underlying pattern. Different myths, but the same startling message. And yet we are conditioned to dismiss them all as mere allegory, fanciful stories, coincidences, anything but historical fact. But what if these stories were never intended as mere metaphors? What if they were painstakingly preserved, not as myths to be romanticized, but as stark warnings to be heeded? There is a deliberate reason why mainstream academia systematically avoids the Anunnaki. There's a calculated reason why ancient tablets like the Enuma Elish and the Atrahasis are relegated to obscure lectures or fringe forums. Because once you concede the possibility that the Anunnaki were real, that they actually existed and walked this earth, you unlock the gateway to the most forbidden truth of all: that humanity is not the pinnacle of creation, but the direct result of ancient extraterrestrial intervention, a revelation that irrevocably alters everything. Some knowledge, however, is deemed too dangerous for mainstream platforms. If you yearn to delve deeper into the truths that cannot be spoken here, I invite you to join our free newsletter, Insights Academy, via the link in the description. For a limited time, you will also receive a complimentary copy of the Kabbalion when you sign up, because the truth is not only far deeper than you have been led to believe, it has been patiently waiting, buried in plain sight, obscured by layers of deliberate misdirection. Now that you have glimpsed the edges of this profound reality, the real journey begins, not into the vastness of outer space, but into the suppressed archives of our forgotten past. The central question is no longer whether the Anunnaki existed. The question that burns within the soul is, what part of you did they design, and for what purpose? They did not descend in shimmering robes of light. They did not float serenely through the clouds, playing celestial harps or whispering divine pronouncements. The Sumerians did not imbue their gods with the vague mystery and poetic metaphor we have come to expect from religious texts. Their descriptions were stark, matter-of-fact, almost clinical in their detail. The Anunnaki were sky beings, flesh and blood entities who arrived from the heavens in roaring ships of fire and thunder. And when they touched down upon this planet, they did not merely observe humanity from a detached distance. They actively intervened, they ruled with an iron fist, and they irrevocably altered the very trajectory of our species. The name Anunnaki translates roughly to those who from the heavens came to earth. They were said to originate from a place called Nibiru, a mysterious celestial body described in the ancient tablets as a member of our solar system, though hidden from modern view. According to the Sumerian records, the Anunnaki were not a formless mythological pantheon, but a highly organized royal family, an advanced civilization possessing a distinct hierarchy, individual personalities, and complex internal conflicts. They engaged in sophisticated politics, fostered intense rivalries, and assumed specific roles, mirroring the very rulers of Earth they would later seek to emulate. At the apex of this elaborate hierarchy were figures such as Anu, the Sky Father, the sovereign ruler of Nibiru; Enlil, the strict and often merciless enforcer of order and the champion of adherence to the established laws; and Enki, the brilliant genetic scientist and arguably the more sympathetic figure toward the plight of humanity. Enki, according to numerous ancient texts, was responsible for designing us, meticulously modifying early hominids to fulfill the specific needs of the Anunnaki. But he did not merely fashion us as mindless machines. Some believe he deliberately embedded within us a spark of something divine, something the other Anunnaki feared with a primal intensity. Enki's counterpart, Enlil, on the other hand, is often portrayed as humanity's implacable oppressor, enraged by our burgeoning independence and deeply disturbed by our latent spiritual potential. It was Enlil, according to the Atrahasis epic, who unleashed the catastrophic Great Flood to wipe out the human race, when our collective consciousness became too noisy, too aware, too disruptive to the Anunnaki's meticulously crafted order. In defiance of Enlil's decree, Enki secretly warned a human named Ziusudra, a figure analogous to the biblical Noah, ensuring the survival of our species against all odds. This was not mythology. This was a brutal war waged between higher beings, and humanity was unknowingly cast as the prize and the battlefield. Different cultures, scattered across the globe, have remembered them in drastically different ways. In Babylon, they were venerated as gods of power and empire. In Egypt, the divine pharaohs claimed to carry their sacred blood, ruling as living embodiments of their will. In Mesoamerican civilizations, the sky serpents and bearded gods bestowed upon humanity the gifts of astronomy, architecture, and codified law. Everywhere they went, the Anunnaki, or beings closely resembling them, left behind two unmistakable hallmarks: the sudden and unprecedented rise of advanced civilization, and the pervasive stories of beings descending from the heavens to walk among us. But who were they in truth? Were they extraterrestrials from a hidden planet on the fringes of our solar system? Interdimensional architects capable of manipulating the very fabric of form and matter? Or were they something else entirely, advanced entities operating on a plane of existence beyond the full comprehension of the human mind? What matters most is not necessarily their precise origin, but their profound and undeniable influence on the development of human civilization. They did not merely provide us with tools and symbols, they bestowed upon us the very foundations of structure: organized society, formalized religion, hereditary royalty, codified law, and perhaps most significantly, they implanted within the human psyche the concept of hierarchy, the insidious belief that some are destined to be born above, while others are forever relegated to the ranks below. That knowledge is the exclusive domain of a select few, and that unwavering obedience is the most sacred of virtues. In many respects, the world we inhabit today is still fundamentally Anunnaki in its design. The gods may no longer physically walk among us, but their intricate systems of control most certainly do. The vertical power structure that permeates every facet of our society, the unquestioning reverence for divinely ordained rulers, the deliberate suppression of transformative knowledge beneath layers of ceremony and manipulation. These are not the products of organic evolution. They were meticulously taught, deliberately implanted, and fiercely protected by a web of myths designed to instill fear and discourage critical thinking. To question the Anunnaki is to question every god who has ever demanded your blind loyalty, every institution that has ever claimed to speak on your behalf, every narrative that has ever sought to convince you that you are inherently small, perpetually sinful, or irreparably broken from birth. And perhaps this is the very reason these beings are remembered not only as creators but as master deceivers. They bestowed upon us the gift of fire, only to demand that we kneel in perpetual servitude before it. The more you learn, the more the veil begins to thin, and what you discover behind it is not a fantastical figment of the imagination, but a suppressed history that is far too uncomfortable for the modern world to readily acknowledge. For if these beings were real, and if they did deliberately shape us, then the next logical question is not simply who they were, but whether they ever truly departed. Civilization did not gradually emerge from scattered tribes armed with simple tools. It erupted practically overnight, a sudden and inexplicable blossoming. Complex societies materialized, complete with sophisticated agricultural techniques, advanced city planning, intricate mathematics, complex astronomy, formalized laws, organized priesthoods, codified language systems, and monumental architecture that continues to defy modern engineering. The official historical narrative struggles to convincingly explain how nomadic humans could have suddenly developed all the necessary components to construct and govern thriving metropolises such as Ur, Eridu, and Babylon. But the ancient Sumerians did not leave this crucial question open for debate. They unequivocally identified those responsible for this unprecedented leap in human development, the Anunnaki. According to the ancient tablets, these beings did not merely visit Earth as fleeting tourists. They remained for extended periods, establishing dominance, governing through intermediaries, and meticulously instructing humanity in the arts of civilization. Each Anunnaki god was assigned a specific city, a designated purpose, and dominion over a particular aspect of human affairs. Enki imparted the hidden secrets of water management and advanced agricultural techniques. Ninhursag guided the development of the healing arts and sophisticated biological sciences. Enlil handed down codified laws and established complex political structures. They did not simply provide us with isolated pieces of information. They constructed the very fabric of civilization as we know it. But with every apparent gift came an unseen leash, a subtle form of control. The Sumerians did not view their relationship with the Anunnaki as one of mutual love and enlightenment. They described an existence defined by servitude, constant expectation, and unwavering duty. Humans were created, in the stark words of the ancient texts, to bear the load of the gods. We were not created for the pursuit of freedom and self-actualization. We were engineered for optimized functionality within a predetermined system. The sudden rise of intensive farming, sophisticated calendar systems, elaborate ritual worship, and specialized labor is not simply a random coincidence of human progress. It is the unmistakable sign of deliberate design, a sophisticated system meticulously installed and relentlessly enforced. This is the crucial point that mainstream academia consistently avoids because it forces us to confront an uncomfortable and deeply unsettling question. Were the Anunnaki our benevolent benefactors or our ruthless overseers? They bestowed upon us codified laws, but simultaneously demanded unwavering loyalty. They gifted us magnificent temples, but insisted upon perpetual worship. They brought us knowledge, but deliberately locked it away within exclusive priesthoods and rigid social hierarchies. And while some among them, such as Enki, may have genuinely striven to elevate humanity, the overarching system they implemented was not designed to empower. It was meticulously engineered to control. Look closely, and you will discern the unmistakable fingerprints of this insidious control in nearly every ancient culture. In Egypt, transformative knowledge was tightly held by a privileged priest class who served as intermediaries between the people and the gods. In India, a rigid caste system rigidly defined an individual's role and worth from birth, preventing social mobility and reinforcing the power of the elite. In Mesoamerica, rulers claimed divine right through bloodlines supposedly linked to celestial beings, justifying their absolute authority. Everywhere you look, the same disturbing pattern emerges. Power flows inexorably downward from a seemingly divine source, and unquestioning obedience is the exorbitant price of belonging. The Anunnaki model was not merely spiritual in nature, it was fundamentally structural, shaping the very architecture of our societies and the deepest recesses of our psyches. It embedded itself into our architecture, our systems of governance, even our most mundane daily routines. Cities were consciously built around imposing temples, not around the needs and aspirations of the people. Time was measured not by the natural rhythms of the earth, but by the performance of elaborate rituals dictated by the priesthood. Food production, language itself, even the institution of marriage, all were deliberately shaped by doctrines passed down from on high. And so, humanity unwittingly stepped into a role it never explicitly volunteered for. Perpetual servant to a system it did not create. A system designed to perpetuate its own existence, regardless of the cost to human potential. But this was not solely about physical control. It was about the far more insidious manipulation of the human mind. The Anunnaki did not simply desire compliant workers. They craved fervent loyalty, unwavering reverence, the kind of unquestioning devotion that can only arise from deeply ingrained belief. And so they consciously transformed themselves into gods. They cloaked their advanced technology in a veil of mystery, their raw power in elaborate ritual, their self-serving agendas in profound prophecies. And over countless generations, their physical presence gradually faded from the earthly stage, but their intricate systems of control remained stubbornly in place. We unknowingly inherited the scaffolding of their rule and mistakenly labeled it progress. Consider what has been lost in the process. Humanity once possessed its own natural rhythms, its own intimate connection to the earth, its own intuitive spirituality rooted in direct experience. But those ancient ways were ruthlessly overwritten by the new paradigm. The world became artificially divided, externally focused, and rigidly hierarchical. Authentic spirituality was insidiously replaced with rote obedience to dogma. Thriving community was fractured and replaced with the artificial constructs of class. Genuine wisdom was supplanted by the uncritical acceptance of doctrine, and the self-proclaimed gods smiled down from their lofty perches while we, their unwitting creations, gradually forgot who we truly were and what we were truly capable of achieving. This is not a call to demonize the past or wallow in resentment. It is a desperate plea to remember it clearly, without romanticization or blind acceptance. Because until we honestly confront what was deliberately given to us and what was ruthlessly taken from us, we will continue to mistake sophisticated control for genuine culture and abject servitude for authentic sacredness. The Anunnaki may have played a crucial role in building our world, but they certainly did not build it for us. They built it for themselves and the perpetuation of their self-serving agenda. You have been conditioned to believe that the past is irrevocably behind you, that the antiquated stories of ancient gods have no bearing on the complex systems under which you live today. But the truth is far more unsettling. The meticulously crafted blueprint that the Anunnaki left behind did not vanish with the crumbling of their temples. It was deliberately inherited, meticulously copied, and cleverly modernized. What once required imposing thrones and elaborate rituals now cunningly hides behind the sterile facades of office desks, impersonal courtrooms, and powerful multinational corporations. But the underlying architecture of control remains fundamentally unchanged. The vertical structure of power, the insidious idea that some are inherently born to rule while the vast majority are destined to serve, was deliberately seated in the earliest temples of Mesopotamia. The concept of divine kingship, ostensibly passed down directly from the heavens, was the Anunnaki's ingenious method of installing earthly rulers who would act as their unquestioning proxies, faithfully executing their will on the earthly plane. This was not governance by the will of the people, it was calculated management by bloodline, meticulously sanctioned from the stars. And it worked. It continues to work with chilling efficiency in the modern world. We may no longer bow before idols of Enlil or Anu, but we nevertheless adhere to systems that were meticulously built in their image. Presidents, CEOs, religious figures, they all operate within a rigid hierarchy that is deeply rooted in ancient methods of control. Modern politics is merely theater performed on a very old stage. The same timeless drama played out with updated costumes and slightly altered scripts. The symbols have been cleverly updated. The titles have subtly shifted, but the fundamental structure of power remains frighteningly intact. There is always a ruling class, an elite priesthood of knowledge, and a vast working population subtly bound by invisible chains, meticulously crafted laws, crushing debt, deeply ingrained belief. The modern financial system represents yet another layer of this insidious design. The Sumerians were the first to invent currency and formalized contracts. Mere coincidence or deliberate necessity? Control over populations is achieved far more efficiently through the manipulation of numbers than through the overt application of swords. Modern economies are governed not by objective truth, but by carefully cultivated trust in a system meticulously designed to benefit a select few elites who trace their power through carefully guarded legacy, pervasive secrecy, and meticulously maintained lineage. The divine right of kings has simply morphed into the silent privilege of dynastic families, wielding their power from behind the scenes. Organized religion continues to play its assigned role with chilling precision. Mainstream doctrines subtly echo the ancient priesthoods of old, endlessly repeating sacred stories while carefully concealing their deeper, more transformative meanings. Layers of elaborate symbolism understood only by the initiated are passed down through clandestine mystery schools and exclusive secret societies. The ancient gods have been subtly replaced by venerated saints. The elaborate rituals have been skillfully adjusted to accommodate the rise and fall of new empires. But the underlying energy remains eerily the same. Unwavering worship, unquestioning sacrifice, absolute obedience, a deceptively narrow path cunningly sold as the only route to salvation, and, lurking behind the heavily guarded curtain, silence, control. Even the hallowed halls of education are not immune to this pervasive blueprint. Children are systematically trained to recite, to blindly repeat, to unquestioningly conform, and only rarely to genuinely question the fundamental assumptions of the system. Creativity is ruthlessly boxed in, restricted by arbitrary rules and limitations. Intuition, the innate wisdom that resides within each and every one of us, is actively dismissed as childish fantasy. The ultimate goal of the modern education system is not to ignite inquiring minds and foster critical thinking skills, but to subtly shape young minds, molding them into compliant cogs within the established machine. And when you follow the subtle trail of influence far enough, you will inevitably discover that many seemingly benevolent institutions of knowledge trace their historical lineage back to ancient systems of control, meticulously disguised in modern terms such as academic excellence or standardized success. The pervasive influence of the Anunnaki did not simply vanish into the mists of time. It was deliberately institutionalized, meticulously encoded into every layer of human society until the very structure itself became virtually invisible to the conscious mind. And so you dutifully attend school, diligently pursue a career, faithfully pay your taxes, unquestioningly obey the myriad laws that govern your life, and never once pause to ask yourself, where did this intricate framework originate? Why does power always trickle down from the top, never bubbling up from below? Why is it considered so taboo to critically question the very roots of authority? Because that is precisely the genius of the meticulously designed system. It skillfully trains you to protect it, to reflexively ridicule anything that dares to challenge the accepted narrative, to scoff at ancient wisdom while simultaneously kneeling before the altar of artificial intelligence, to proudly proclaim yourself free while living your life on a leash you cannot even perceive. It is not overt oppression enforced with physical chains. It is subtle programming delivered through carefully engineered comfort. And those who continue to pull the strings from behind the scenes no longer need to overtly show their faces. They painstakingly wrote the original blueprint, deliberately set it loose upon the world, and cunningly allowed it to run itself, perpetuating their self-serving agenda for millennia. But here is the most ingenious twist of all. They did not merely program human society, they insidiously programmed your very beliefs, your deepest sense of possibility, your fundamental perception of the past. And until you consciously unlearn their carefully crafted story, you can never fully reclaim your own authentic narrative. The Anunnaki did not simply build cities, codify laws, and establish kingdoms. They encoded something far more powerful and enduring. Carefully selected knowledge, but not the type of accessible knowledge that can be readily found in textbooks or openly discussed within the walls of temples. This was sacred knowledge, deliberately hidden in plain sight, encoded within enduring symbols, subtly embedded in the fabric of ancient stories, and meticulously passed down through exclusive rituals and clandestine mystery schools, intentionally kept out of reach of the masses, intended only for a select few initiates. Because information is power, and true power has always been fundamentally about what is intentionally kept hidden, not what is freely revealed. Look closely, and you will see it subtly manifested everywhere. In the precise geometry of ancient temples, in the calculated alignment of sacred sites to specific celestial bodies, in the recurring significance of numbers, in the eerily mirrored myths, in the silent patterns that subtly whisper their secrets throughout human history. From the ubiquitous spirals that dominate Mesopotamian art to the intricate architecture of the Egyptian pyramids, from the subtle chakra systems of the East to the hidden hermetic principles of the West, it is all part of the same carefully constructed code, a universal language of consciousness, a detailed map of the very nature of reality. The Sumerians were not merely meticulous record keepers. They were skilled translators of cosmic law, adept at converting profound metaphysical concepts into tangible forms. They spoke of the ME, divine decrees, or fundamental energetic laws that governed not only human society, but the very fabric of existence itself. These were not merely arbitrary rules for human behavior, they were the foundational principles of creation, echoing the Hermetic laws described thousands of years later. As above, so below, the principle of vibration, the law of polarity. And those laws were not invented by the Anunnaki, they were simply remembered, preserved, and carefully protected because they represent the very mechanisms of the universe, and whoever possesses a true understanding of them has the potential to bend reality to their will. This is the crucial point where the story of the Anunnaki subtly shifts from the strictly historical to the profoundly spiritual. For these beings did not merely manipulate genes, they subtly manipulated frequency, human consciousness, and the very nature of perception. They possessed an inherent understanding that reality is not solely physical in nature, but also fundamentally vibrational. That thought creates form, that individual belief shapes tangible outcome, and that if you can successfully control what a being believes, you can effectively control what that being experiences. And so they did not merely engineer humanity, they deliberately engineered belief systems, subtly embedding their self-serving narratives within the fabric of religion, mythology, and archetypal stories, transforming themselves into all-powerful gods, cunningly concealing universal truth beneath layers of divinely inspired drama. They bestowed upon humanity elaborate rituals that subtly mimic authentic spiritual practices, but without providing the necessary keys to unlock their true potential. Creating elaborate symbols without providing the crucial context for their genuine interpretation, bestowing raw power without providing true access to its underlying mechanisms. And so, humanity gradually forgot not only who the Anunnaki truly were, but also who they themselves were truly meant to become, powerful creators in their own right. The transformative knowledge was not entirely lost. It was deliberately hidden, meticulously preserved in ancient texts, intricately woven into the geometry of sacred sites, carefully protected within the rituals of initiatory traditions, and cleverly concealed within cryptic metaphors. It subtly appears in texts such as the Kybalion, in the suppressed Gnostic texts, and in the legendary Emerald Tablets. It subtly whispers its secrets through the symbolism of the tarot, the transformative processes of alchemy, and the interpretive lens of astrology, but it always remains just tantalizingly out of reach for the average seeker, deliberately obscured by layers of deliberate misdirection. Because this kind of transformative knowledge was deemed far too dangerous by those who had deliberately built their systems upon a foundation of ignorance and blind obedience. What they truly feared was not overt rebellion. It was the dawning of remembrance, the sudden and irreversible awakening of human consciousness. Because a human being who possesses a true understanding of the underlying nature of consciousness becomes inherently ungovernable. That kind of self-awareness dissolves artificial hierarchy, shatters the chains of control, and empowers the individual to rewrite their own narrative from within. That kind of awakened human being does not blindly obey, they courageously create. And that is the one thing the self-proclaimed old gods could never tolerate. But here is the profound beauty of it all. You were never truly meant to remain asleep. The ancient code is still here, patiently waiting to be deciphered. The subtle clues have stubbornly survived the test of time, and if you diligently follow them, if you consciously study the recurring patterns, if you dare to question the accepted myths and listen to the quiet whispers of your own inner knowing, you will inevitably begin to unlock the ancient wisdom that was always rightfully yours. You do not need a temple, you do not need external permission. You simply need mindful awareness, unwavering discipline, and the courageous determination to unlearn the carefully crafted beliefs that they deliberately taught you to accept as truth. The Anunnaki did not simply give humanity civilization. They intentionally left behind an intricate test, a cosmic riddle to be solved. Would we remain trapped within the meticulously constructed cage, hypnotized by cleverly crafted stories and blinded by unthinking worship? Or would we courageously decode the underlying truth, reclaim the ancient knowledge, and rise, not as subservient servants, but as empowered creators in our own right? The more you delve into the complex story of the Anunnaki, the harder it becomes to definitively categorize them. Were they benevolent gods, skilled genetic engineers, compassionate saviors, or ruthless enslavers? The ancient texts do not present a simplistic narrative of good versus evil. They reveal a fractured tale of intense rivalry, internal rebellion, and conflicting agendas. The Anunnaki were not a unified force acting in perfect harmony. They were deeply divided, and humanity was unknowingly caught in the crossfire. At the very heart of this epic division were two prominent brothers, Enki and Enlil, both sons of Anu, the supreme ruler of their world, but possessing drastically different visions for the future of ours. Enki, the brilliant scientist, the self-proclaimed architect of humanity, was said to be inherently compassionate, eternally curious, and perhaps even genuinely protective of his creation. He saw profound potential in humans, something intrinsically sacred, something undeniably worth preserving. Enlil, on the other hand, viewed us primarily as tools, expendable resources, a means to an end. To him, we were inherently noisy, stubbornly rebellious, deeply flawed, a dangerous mistake that needed to be strictly managed or, if necessary, ruthlessly removed from the cosmic equation. These were not merely abstract philosophical differences. They played out in the oldest stories ever written, shaping the very destiny of humankind. When humanity grew too numerous, too loud, too independent, it was Enlil who relentlessly called for our destruction, viewing us as an unruly experiment gone awry. It was Enlil who unleashed the catastrophic Great Flood in a desperate attempt to reset the entire experiment, erasing the perceived mistakes of the past. And it was Enki who secretly warned one righteous man, Ziusudra, ensuring that at least a remnant of humanity would survive the cataclysm. Sound vaguely familiar? Because thousands of years later, the very same story was retold in the book of Genesis, with the name subtly changed, the overt presence of the gods cunningly hidden from view, but the fundamental structure of the narrative stubbornly intact. This fundamental duality runs far deeper than ancient mythology. It reflects the persistent tension that continues to permeate our world today, a struggle between one force that relentlessly seeks to control, to deliberately limit, to ruthlessly dominate, and another force that strives to awaken, to liberate, to foster genuine evolution. Both forces are subtly embedded within our systems, intricately woven into our stories, and subtly influencing the very recesses of our psyche. Because whether or not you personally believe in the literal existence of ancient sky beings, you undeniably inhabit a world that has been profoundly shaped by their enduring legacy. A world where rigid control is cunningly disguised as benevolent order, and genuine freedom is deliberately framed as dangerous chaos. It is tempting to view the Anunnaki solely as malevolent villains, as ruthless enslavers who hijacked a promising planet and deliberately bent its native species to their tyrannical will. And there is undeniable evidence, linguistic, architectural, symbolic, that clearly supports this interpretation. But it is equally plausible that within their complex ranks were rebels, whistleblowers, courageous protectors, that not all Anunnaki uniformly agreed with the overarching plan, that some of them, like Enki, strategically planted seeds of resistance, subtly coding them into our very DNA and carefully embedding them within the fabric of our ancient myths, patiently waiting for us to collectively remember. Because perhaps the real story is not simply about them, perhaps it is fundamentally about us. About whether we passively remain trapped within the insidious legacy of division, or whether we courageously learn to integrate both seemingly opposing sides of our complex inheritance. The meticulously programmed obedience and the indomitable divine spark, the pervasive shadow and the radiant light, the controlling creator and the defiant rebel. If Enki saw something undeniably worth saving within us, perhaps that is because he instinctively recognized what we have long since forgotten. That we are not simply genetically modified primates, crudely crafted for perpetual servitude. We are also inherently vessels of consciousness, endowed with the capacity for profound memory, empowered with the freedom of choice and capable of extraordinary transformation. We are the unfinished story, the unpredictable element within the carefully crafted equation, the part of the cosmic narrative that was never truly meant to rigidly follow the predetermined script. And if that is indeed true, then the entire narrative subtly shifts. The Anunnaki were not all-powerful gods or irredeemable devils. They were merely catalysts, albeit highly influential ones. They introduced profound complexity, inherent duality and persistent conflict, and then they deliberately stepped back, or were perhaps forcibly compelled to withdraw, leaving us to grapple with the challenging task of writing the next chapter of the human story, the chapter in which we consciously decide who we truly are, not in slavish imitation of their carefully crafted image, but in the courageous affirmation of our own authentic potential. If they arrived once, who is to say they will not inevitably return? That haunting question has relentlessly preoccupied researchers, mystics, and ancient cultures for countless millennia. Because for many, the Anunnaki story does not simply end with their departure. It continues with a haunting promise or a dire warning of their eventual return. The Sumerians never explicitly stated that the Anunnaki had permanently abandoned Earth. In fact, their ancient texts strongly suggest that they were cyclical visitors, appearing at specific intervals meticulously tied to predictable celestial events. The enigmatic concept of Nibiru, a mysterious planet or celestial body strongly associated with the Anunnaki, is often described as possessing an unusually elongated orbit, one that brings it into Earth's vicinity approximately every few thousand years. Mainstream science dismisses this as mere myth, yet modern astronomers have quietly begun discussing the intriguing possibility of an undiscovered Planet 9 lurking on the remote fringes of our solar system. Coincidence or subtly placed breadcrumb? Ancient prophecies from disparate cultures across the globe seem to subtly echo the same underlying theme: the anticipated return of beings from the sky who came once before and will inevitably return when the stars once again align. The Hopi speak reverently of their star brothers. The Dogon tribe of Mali possesses remarkably complex astronomical knowledge that they attribute to visitors from the Sirius star system. The Mayan calendar meticulously marked great cycles of return, predicting significant shifts in human consciousness. And even the Bible warns of gods descending from the heavens in the final days. Could these seemingly disparate stories all be subtly describing the same recurring event, using slightly different language and distinct cultural metaphors? Some firmly believe that the Anunnaki never truly left, that they simply stepped back from overt intervention, intentionally concealed themselves, or are currently operating on subtle planes of existence that our limited senses cannot yet readily perceive. That their influence is still subtly at play in the world today, skillfully hidden behind the carefully constructed facades of world leaders, powerful bloodlines, and secretive societies. Others speculate that they remain patiently distant, passively observing, keenly waiting for precisely the right moment to return. Not as benevolent saviors, not as ruthless tyrants, but as a challenging test for the evolving human species. Because if they do indeed return, what will they find? A humanity still blindly asleep, fervently worshipping false idols, and obediently adhering to intricate systems deliberately built in their controlling image, or a species courageously awakening to its inherent sovereignty, ready to consciously meet them as equals rather than as subservient subjects? That is the truly pivotal question that hangs in the balance. Perhaps the Anunnaki are not merely external beings originating from another planet. Perhaps they are also symbolic reflections of something far deeper, representing the fundamental forces of evolution, the inherent drive for transformation, and the inevitable reckoning that awaits all species. Their highly anticipated return might not manifest as literal spaceships dramatically descending over major cities. It might instead manifest as a subtle but pervasive mass awakening of human consciousness, a rapid collapse of outdated and artificial systems, a powerful remembering of the long-suppressed wisdom that has been deliberately buried for millennia. Perhaps their return is already subtly unfolding, expressed through vivid dreams, heightened intuition, profound DNA activation, and the powerful collective call for something far greater than the limited reality we have been conditioned to accept. Consider the transformative times we are currently living through: the rapid crumbling of long-standing structures, the widespread exposure of deeply guarded secrets, the unquenchable hunger for deeper meaning that transcends superficial materialism, the surging rise of spiritual consciousness, the resurgence of metaphysics, and the growing embrace of ancient wisdom that is rapidly coming back into focus. These are not random, isolated occurrences. They are unmistakable signals, the birth pangs of a species preparing itself for something it cannot fully explain but intuitively feels in its very bones. We are not merely passively waiting for the Anunnaki to physically return. We are actively preparing ourselves to consciously meet them, to engage them with heightened awareness and critical discernment. Because if they should appear again, whether physically or symbolically, they will not be seeking docile slaves or unquestioning worshippers. They will be seeking those who consciously remembered, those who bravely broke free from the insidious programming, those who courageously saw through the elaborate illusion of artificial hierarchy and reclaimed their rightful place within the cosmic conversation. The profound return is not fundamentally about them. It is fundamentally about us. Are we truly ready? From the very moment you took your first breath, the systematic process of forgetting deliberately began, not because you were inherently weak or somehow flawed or intrinsically incapable, but because the intricate world you were born into was meticulously designed to make you forget. To forget the undeniable truth of who you truly are, to forget the hidden origins of your species, to forget the secret codes subtly embedded within your blood, and to forget the lingering echoes of ancient wisdom that still pulse faintly within your dreams. You were not merely taught selectively curated facts. You were carefully conditioned with deeply ingrained beliefs, and belief, far more than objective knowledge, shapes the very fabric of your reality. You were told that we emerged spontaneously from nothing, the result of a random cosmic accident. First came simple cells, then primitive fish, then clumsy monkeys, then finally modern humans. No intelligent design, no inherent purpose, no guiding higher intelligence, just blind chaos crudely disguised as science. And if that starkly materialistic story did not quite resonate with your soul, there was always another waiting in the wings, a carefully crafted narrative about divine creation by a distant, untouchable God who intentionally made you separate from him, eternally beneath his divine grace. Either way, the underlying message remained chillingly the same. You are inherently small, you are fundamentally powerless, and the best. So, as we've explored, the story of the Anunnaki, whether taken literally or symbolically, urges us to question everything we think we know about our origins and the structures that govern our world. It invites us to reclaim our inherent power, to break free from limiting beliefs, and to remember the ancient wisdom that lies dormant within us. Ultimately, it's a message of hope and empowerment. We are not simply puppets in a predetermined game, but conscious creators capable of shaping our own reality. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. What resonates with you the most? Do you have any questions or alternative perspectives? Please leave a comment below and let's start a conversation. And if you found this exploration thought-provoking, please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on future deep dives into these fascinating and often hidden truths. Until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep remembering.